What's good, everybody? It's your boy Tasso, and I'm with my man Steven today. Um, this is a guy that I've known him, but I haven't really known him, and it's kind of interesting how like social media is kind of weird in some ways, but it actually brings people together in some ways too. And so this is a guy that I've known since high school, and until recently we started kind of just like connecting a little bit, and I don't know, felt a good energy from him. We connected a little bit more last week and talked about some stuff. And I feel like this is just a kind of a platform for us to just maybe make those conversations more public. So if you wanted to just kind of give the people a little bit of your background and where you are right now and kind of what that whole situation has been like.
Yeah. So so yeah, me and Tasso, we went to the same high school. So good old Homewood Flossmoor. So that's
We
that's
are.
that's where that connection comes from. So my background, I studied engineering in college and university, and my dream was to like travel the world and to do engineering. And I ultimately want to be like a business owner, and I want to be like an inventor. So
Hmm.
currently I'm doing like engineering research in Japan, in the southern islands of Okinawa, and I hope to continue and to open a company so that I can reach out to our community, have a nice like black owned
Oh yeah,
like
I feel
tech
that.
company. I think that kind of like
Yeah,
Black
man.
Panther. I think that'd be pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that would be
That's the
super
long term
dope.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like this kind I don't know why this image just popped in my head, but like all the like black hair salon, like not salons, like the like beauty stores and stuff, they're owned by like mostly Chinese people in America. Like Asian
It's
people own a
odd,
lot of them.
right?
And it would be kind of funny, just like as a flip flop, we just start having like black tech owners in like all these Asian countries. I don't know. It's just the
I think
image.
that'd be decent. That'd be decent.
It'd be super
So
dope. Um, but yeah, okay. So one of the things that I really thought was interesting in our last conversation was this concept of what it means to live collectively versus like individually. And so um one of the things you touched on was how you react to fear in your life. Like what does that mean to you as an indicator? And I thought that a cool intersection of those two is kind of like how do you think that fear has impacted you as far as your individual growth journey? And then how do you think it has impacted like the whole of society as we kind of try to evolve and make ourselves to a better people?
yeah. So I feel like fear is kind of like a tool where you can use it for good, you can use it for bad. For
Mm,
example, fear is an indicator that you're uncomfortable, something's happening, and it's used for bad. That's why people turn against each other. People are afraid of different races and whatever.
true.
But but then I feel like you use fear as a maybe a good way. Where for me,
Explain that because I feel like fear is just 100% bad, but at the same time,
yeah,
I don't know. Like that's just my opinion. So you can probably convince me otherwise.
yeah, no, I feel like that makes sense. It makes sense to think of it as bad, but
Because it's
but
like maybe not fully bad, because I see what you're saying. Like it's kind of like it helps us filter and like I don't know, like be more aware of the
yeah,
reality.
I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like fear is also a good indicator that growth is on the cusp of happening.
Hmm.
It matters what you're doing though.
So there's two things with that. First of all, I think that as I was saying that fear is bad, it actually popped up in my head. So if you don't know, I'm a Christian, but at the same time, I don't really associate a lot with religion. So I'm in this weird nebulous between like what my pastor says and what I believe and like how the Bible reads and what I feel. And so it's kind of like it's a weird space. But one of the
Yeah,
things that I always read in scripture is it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it's kind of like this idea that even if you don't believe in God, it's this healthy understanding of how small you are can maybe start you on that journey to begin learning stuff for real. And I just feel
yeah.
like there's this I don't know, this is parallel there. And I feel like you being an engineer. So I was just watching the Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk, and he
Okay,
was
yeah.
saying there's the first one that he smoked weed, and then there was a second one that he just released a couple of days ago. It was a little more constructive, and in it
Okay.
he talked about he was just talking about there was an over allocation of smart people in the areas of finance and law, and that there needs to be more people who are smart that are building stuff. And I just wanted to know what your thought. That's what
Huh.
Elon Musk said on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of days ago. I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that were.
That's interesting. I think I watched that video. He said
Yeah, it
there's
was
too
in like
many
the
smart
first 15
people.
minutes. Yeah, he was saying there's too many. So if you look at the bell curve, there's a bell curve of smart people, right? And because the
Yeah.
payoff or the return on investment for being in law or in finance seems to be higher in terms of fiscal back,
Ah.
you get an over allocation of people who are higher on that smartness bell curve that are going into these areas. But what
Mm-hmm.
they actually need are things in like engineering, manufacturing, like actually building things, because that's what we are now being dependent on other countries for. And we're starting to realize that
I see.
manufacturing is not just a throwaway thing, it's like an actual skill. And if we want to be in the lead in the world, then we need to be able to build things.
Then maybe, if we have so many people going towards law and finances, what about we could either just raise the reward of being like some kind of builder or inventor?
That would be
That's
ideal.
You're right. That's probably like the easy way. Or like maybe do it the other way. Like I feel like socially we're so pressed on, make money. If you're smart, make money.
Yeah.
But I feel like people need to focus on, what they want to do.
Make
Like,
impact.
right. Like I feel like there's probably a lot of lawyers who are like, I want to make money,
Yeah.
but they probably want to be, I don't know, an artist. And they could have gone and made a great studio,
Mm.
but they filed the money because it's, I guess, more guaranteed. Because
It just feels more stable. Because
yeah.
it's like that's what everybody else believes, type of thing. So
Hmm.
it's like you just go with that flow. I there's this quote I just heard today, and I feel like it's a really interesting one. And you just touched on creativity, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this quote really quick. So there was this dude named Jordan B. Peterson, and he said, "Creativity is an extrapolation of youth." So essentially, that how creative
Yeah.
you are is almost like your ability to tap into like your youthful self. Like, what do you think about that, or
Y-
does that change anything about anything now?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually, I don't know that quote, but I have
Uh,
a very strong mindset about that.
okay,
And
okay,
and I'm going to answer and also return a question back to you,
okay.
actually.
Fair enough.
So, first, for me, the biggest thing about my life, no matter how old I get, I always want to keep my, I guess, childhood unlocked. I don't know if you could call it innocence, you could call it, I don't know, maturity,
I know what you
you
mean.
know,
It's like that inner
right?
sense of the core of who you really are before everything
Yeah.
in life started to pile on.
Yeah. Maybe it's like called play.
Yeah.
Just I want to keep that, and no matter what, I don't want to lose that, which a lot of people do as they get older.
Mm,
So I think that is very true. That innocence, that young, whatever it is, does
yeah.
help innovate and create. So I think about maybe 6 months ago, I asked myself this question, talking about innocence and youth, is like, would you consider somebody who is innocent? Is that a bad thing?
Hmm.
At the
I
age
think
of
that
25?
people think of it as a bad thing nowadays. Sometimes it's seen as
Yeah,
like you haven't been through anything truly. But even though it might just be your ability to hold on to a mindset, it can be perceived as if
exactly.
you're not able to. You know what I mean? So I see what you mean there, because it's I think what you maybe are thinking of is the word naive, because I don't know if like maybe it's like an innocence can be seen as good or bad sometimes, but I feel like it's mostly still seen as good. Like I feel like people
Okay.
still kind of
Okay.
see you as like, wow, like maybe they kind of a little bit envious because they're like, I wish, but at the same time, they almost don't want to mess it up in a way. Sometimes, unless you're like a psychopath.
Right.
So I feel like there's a
Yeah.
good thing about innocence. I think that the naivete, and I feel like that's maybe the gap from what you should know to what you do know, or how people perceive that. I don't know.
Right.
It's a weird dance that people have, because it's I don't know, it's all these social norms that we've built up, right? And we're just trying to figure out what
Yeah.
everybody else feels. Man, so speaking of social norms, you live
Yeah.
in Japan. You said Okinawa, yeah?
Yeah.
And in that place, culturally, I was interested in how your experiences are with maybe not necessarily racism. I don't want to like put a label on it, but just your cultural exchanges with different people and how that has maybe been different in this context. And I think that maybe even the word racism is kind of interesting because we all kind of have these implicit biases and stereotypes that we've built up. But once we get
Nice.
confronted with them, then what is our reaction, right? Is it something out of fear, something out of curiosity, something out of love? And I think that's
Mm.
what kind of defines us as human beings. Instead of having those preconceptions, it's like, how do we engage with them? So I was going to ask, like, being in Japan, how do you have to engage with that?
So I guess, I feel like there's different ways people engage, of course, when they're approached. So for me, so I guess here's the way that I do it, and then I'll give you examples. But if somebody said something, I guess that kind of triggered me a little bit, I would first try to figure out, did they understand what they said, right? I'll first see, like, did you even know,
Mm.
right? For example, like,
Even that step right there takes a lot because you're assuming that the person had good intentions somewhere in
yeah,
deep with, like, that is a tough assumption always to make because it's easy just to go for the other way and be like, you intentionally did this because you hate life and everything about you is evil.
yeah, like I try to always assume people don't mean bad, but
Yeah.
of course, maybe this goes back to that innocence thing,
Yeah,
right?
that's the
That gets you
struggle.
in trouble. It gets you
Yeah,
in trouble
I
sometimes,
feel you, man. I feel you.
so you gotta be careful. But
Yeah.
so, for example, like if somebody comes up to me and they touch my hair, right?
Mm.
First I'm like, okay, we live in Japan. Do you know that's
So that
kind of
happens.
strange?
People touch your hair, they just
It, it
grab it.
happened to me probably like 3 times, and they were
Wow.
like either students and then or like in front of my face.
Wow.
And but two of them asked, and the other one just kind of just went for it,
Okay.
right?
At least it's only one of them that just went for it. I
Yeah,
feel like three
they're just
going
like,
for it is a little wild, but okay.
yeah, just like yeah, but
Yeah, I got
yeah,
they
just
just
like
grab the back of your stuff. But
yeah, they're like, is
that's
that
happening.
real?
Okay.
So
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, so when it happens,
Yeah.
so first the person who just did it, I was like, oh, why'd you do that? And they're like, oh, I was curious if it was real or fake. And I was like, in the States where I'm from, a lot of people don't find that appropriate. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know. We don't have that here. And then
Yeah.
they don't do it again after
Yeah.
that. Or for the people who ask, I guess what I do then, maybe this is wrong, but it
Hmm.
was two other Japanese girls, separate
Mm-hmm.
times, and they said, hey, your hair is different. I like it. Can I touch it? And then I would reverse and say, if you let me touch your hair, I will let you touch my hair. And then they say, okay. And then it's like a mutual thing. I touch her hair. Right?
That's
So then
how
just,
that's how you build.
I mean, at that point, it becomes mutual. So
Okay. I see it.
now different people have different approaches. And
Yeah.
the, I know like in Japan, they don't know they don't know what goes on in these states. I wouldn't do that in the United States because I
Hmm.
would assume they would know, because you live among, or you have probably at least see how
Yeah.
a lot of people react.
Yeah. You're more
So
ingrained in that cultural context. I feel like a lot of Asia
yeah,
can almost seem like it's a little bit cut off from the rest of the world sometimes. It's like almost like a different. Well, I mean, it's still very heavily interconnected with the rest of the world in some ways, but in other ways, it kind of feels more distant. I don't know.
it's the language, dude. Like
Mm,
how if they don't speak English, how can I tell them not touch my hair? They can
fair.
maybe tell by my tone of voice, but
Yeah.
you just can't communicate that.
Yeah, man. Hmm. That's interesting. Okay. So, um, this is something that just popped up as well, and it wasn't necessarily on the card I told you before. So this is
Go
um,
for it.
just an interesting thought. But I heard another quote today that you can only be as good as you recognize that you are evil. And it's just weird. Let me make sure I'm quoting it right too, because it was a wild, like, you cannot be a good person until you know how much evil you contain inside of you. So a similar kind of um, I don't know, thought. I don't know what your thoughts on that were because it kind of struck me as like the capability of being good isn't necessarily in being like deferential, but it's in being able to crush somebody or something, but deciding not to. It's almost like that
Uh,
idea of like you have the capacity to, like I will mess you up, but out of a different side of me that I'm going to operate out of. We can,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
So maybe in that quote, they're looking at the, the idea of good.
Hmm.
So like, I feel like normally good is like you're doing something good. I'm giving you money. But maybe you can also say good is not doing something. Good is not stealing.
Yeah,
So
good.
maybe it goes
It's
to
a
that.
weird thing too, because good is like a, it's like a, we all kind of inherently know it, but we don't necessarily like we try to extrapolate into rules all the time, but it doesn't always follow. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the rules can get hacked. Like maybe, like as you said, maybe giving people money is good, and then we get into this weird area of like in certain tax brackets where it's actually used for different levers of control.
Yeah.
And it's
You
like,
got
or
bribing and
maybe you have to
stuff.
think of the why behind the matter. Like things like start becoming weird. So we all kind of know inherently what's good. But if people get really good at gaming the system or making it so that you've pretty much commodified what has been deemed as good in this system and you've used it for whatever your ends are, it becomes weird. So it's like this thing where we have, I don't know, we have to, if we don't recognize the depravity or the badness that we can exude, then
Hmm.
sometimes it helps, like it makes us feel like we're just almost being carried along the current of life. And I feel like you, as somebody who's maybe like done something that's a little out of the ordinary by just moving from the United States to Japan, like that could be something that you have, I don't know, maybe grappled with in some way, shape, or form. Is like knowing that you could have maybe done something a different type of way or acted a certain way, but or you could have made a certain decision or certain gone a certain direction, but
Hmm.
you've decided to go in a different one, right? Like, I don't know. Like, does that have any bearing on how you interact with the world?
Yeah. I guess instead of good, I would look at it more towards happiness. So like,
Okay.
I could have took the route of I could have stayed in California and I could have hustled to get an engineering job out there. But I, I would have still been optimistic. I would have been still happy. But like, I know my true happiness was traveling the world. So
Boom.
I guess going to that instead of I chose to follow what makes me happy despite the challenges and the gamble I took, than to I guess settle, kind of going back to what the whole, you just follow like more stable, like the conversation with
Yeah.
Elon and
No,
you know,
definitely. That's the right now that's the common knowledge though, right? Like that's what most people do is they just kind of go along with what the
yeah,
society at the time is telling them. Okay. So really wanted to get into this conversation as well. And this one kind of gets back to how we're supposed to interact with each other because we kind of maybe a little bit broke down the what of kind of, I don't know, just basically how we interact today, but maybe there's a little bit of a optimistic streak in both of us, and we can see that there could be
yeah,
potential for a better future. Um, and the currency, what is the currency of some sort of future that we're actually engaging with each other better look like? Because I think that the answer to this capitalist and like it's good for some reasons, but in other reasons it commodifies people and makes us feel like we're part of a machine and like all these other things. So is there a way that we can become almost divorce our human value from our fiscal value? Like we can't be now seen as a number, but we're seen as a something. I don't know.
I think I think what might be kind of interesting would be, I, so people always say like time is the most precious thing. So
Right.
maybe time is the currency, and maybe we
Mhm.
should start. I don't want to say advertise, but maybe we should start just showing how precious time is some way. I don't know,
Hmm.
but if we, I don't know, we start showing people like, okay, your time is actually very precious to you if we displayed this, and
Yeah,
people actually got that. I think at
that's the
that point
hard
people
part.
realize,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, and not too hard, but at the same time, people have been programmed for so long to believe that money is what buys them everything.
that's the thing. It's like, how can we make it so that time is more precious than money?
Yeah, that's where I want to get to because once you start understanding that the experiences and the moments that you're able to accumulate, that's what make your life up. and not the hours
Yeah.
spent trying to get more money to do something else. Like you're gonna try to spend your money to travel anyway, so why not just do that out the gate and just like figure it
Exactly.
out as you go along? Yeah. And so to me, that's kind of like this new type of mindset that might be starting to proliferate, but it's still a little bit under the surface.
You know what would be interesting
Yeah.
with coronavirus and everything?
Hmm.
What if everybody had a near death experience? You know, people always say, you
That
know,
would wake us up so fast.
that near death experience like makes you realize like, oh, my life, you know, my family, my kids, you know.
Yeah.
So coronavirus, like you see where I'm going, like
Maybe
everybody's
this
gonna
is
worry
like
for their life.
everybody is just going through a
Exactly.
simultaneous near-death
Near life
experience. Then
exactly. So
that is an
maybe
interesting theory.
you could utilize this unified near death experience
Hmm.
to make people realize how precious time is if we do it correctly.
If we do it correctly, and I feel like that's where the battle is right now. Like
Yeah,
there's all these stuff going on with different types of information and different types of emotions being flung, but
right,
I feel
right.
like trying to stay on that narrow path of we need to come together and use this piece of history and this moment of time and this energy that we have collectively
Yeah, yeah.
to like go in a new direction.
Like, what if, hypothetically,
Hmm.
like, let's say the virus, something came up, and let's say we had to work together to save humanity.
That's what they
Like,
always talk about, like aliens coming to attack, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. like,
Like, what if
like,
aliens came? Like, this is our alien right now. This is our
yeah, that's it
alien.
unifies us, right?
This is it.
Like, what if they said, oh, I don't know, this country has part A of the cure, or maybe it's maybe in our biology. Maybe
Hmm.
like Africans have this genome,
Yeah.
Europeans have this genome, Asians, you know, and they're like, oh, if we combine all of our stuff together,
Boom, boom, boom.
I don't know. I
I
wonder
feel
if
like
people would
there's
like look past.
no, it's definitely one of those situations, right? Like we can definitely decide to shore up our walls and gear up for battle, but we can also go in the opposite direction of being like, yo, let's do this together. Let's figure out how we're going to move forward. Because at the end of the
Yeah,
day, we're all one race and we all evolve from like 99.99% of the same DNA. So it's like we should probably figure out how to collaborate better.
yeah, yeah. And just have a
um,
near death experience together.
okay. So if time is the currency in the future, how do we, I don't know, how do we stay connected? Like, what is the thing that keeps us all from just going off into our own separate little worlds and never wanting to interact with everybody else?
So I guess so here's the difference though with time versus like cash is that for cash you have a relative idea of how much you have,
Hmm.
right? So you kind of know what you can afford. Time, I don't know. I mean, I think I have 60 years left,
Yeah,
right? But realistically, I could have one.
yeah.
So I'm curious, like if they created some invention that told you, Tasso, you have 10 years left.
Have you ever seen the movie In Time?
Did I? That sounds familiar. I don't think so though, but that sounds familiar.
This movie with Justin Timberlake. Um, it's an interesting plot line. It pretty much has this guy who, like, everybody in the civilization is wearing this sort of like there's like under their skin or something this like clock that has a countdown of their lives, and
Oh, I think
essentially,
okay.
yeah, when it gets to the end and they die, and there's like different zones of people, and the people at the very bottom zone, they're always with like maybe a couple more days left, or like people like literally have like 24 hours left on their clock and they have to like buy a bus for like 6 hours and make it to their like in like really close calls before they can like recharge up at some booth. And then this guy was able to break through all these layers of it and figure out that there's people on the other end who literally have millions of years that they just gamble with. And it's like this concept
Wow.
that like, yo, if we started thinking in different ways, like that's almost similar to how money is like able to stretch, at least in perception, people's ability to live
Yeah.
on. But it was a trippy movie. You should watch it one time if you ever have like
Yeah.
a second. But yeah,
Okay. I remember seeing the trailer.
yeah, it's In Time with Justin Timberlake, and it was kind of like it didn't have that great of reviews, to be honest. But I was surprised because I liked it. But anyway, off of that, I think that there's another thing that goes with that, and that's having an abundance mindset, like having that mindset of wanting to continue to create and be more and do more. How does that factor into this new type of time slash love economy? Like, how do we use this theory of abundance? Because right now, I think that there's this idea that we don't have enough, or like we're all kind of fighting each other for what like little scraps are left.
Right. Uh, yeah, it's kind of, so I guess it comes down to which one is it? I get it confused. Empathy or sympathy, whichever one, like
They're both pretty
to
much the
put your
same thing, but empathy is the word that I like to use because it makes it more like you're projecting more into that situation versus just kind of like being there. I don't know
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
you can, yeah, sympathy. Maybe you can just remember that by being like, like, uh, like I don't know. I don't even
I
know
think sympathy is like you feel sad for them,
exactly.
but well, empathy, you're like, okay, I'm actually gonna like be in their shoes. I
Boom. I think that's the
I
distinction.
think something like that.
Yeah.
But so I feel like first people, it's a lot of assumptions, and that could get you in trouble. But
Mm.
you know, I feel like everybody wants the same thing, right? I feel like everybody craves human connection, and I feel like everybody craves like some form of love, happiness, whatever that good feeling is. So
Yeah.
I think when it comes to like people either having enough or not having enough, I think it just comes down to people just like, why not give it? Are you shy? Are you like, I don't, I guess that's a question I gotta ask myself.
It's like
Why not
this
tell
is like
somebody
this
hello?
material that we can just make out of nothing and we can do it
Yeah.
indefinitely, but we don't for some reason.
Why, right. Why not? So like, I feel like for me, maybe I'm just like, either like sometimes you just like don't feel like it. You're just kind of, you're
Mm.
focused, or maybe you're just feeling shy one day. You know, you're not trying to talk to a stranger,
Yeah.
or I don't know. Like sometimes you just,
It's
I don't know,
interesting.
just don't do it. You know, why don't you
So
for
that gets into
yourself?
this idea that I think is important. Like I was talking about this last or a couple weeks ago, this idea of being sustainable versus resilient. And I think sustainability is a good goal to have because it's being able to maintain this sort of structure. But then there's a step beyond that, which I think is resilience, and that's being like your internal structure has now become to where you're flexible enough to withstand any changes. So it's like you have sustainability, which maybe like looks like a big ecosystem of being able to keep it, but then you have like resiliency, which is like the individual plants like making it through like all the different seasons of change and growing. And I
Hmm.
think that when we think of like how we think of ourselves in terms of we're all here for one thing, I really think that means that there's this connection that all humans have. But when
Hmm.
that connection is severed, it's hard for us to see each other clearly. But when we're back in a better like place to understand each other, then maybe we can start to, as you say, empathize or start to think abundantly and actually just give things away. Like it has to be based, it has to be resting on something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I
some
think
reality everybody has to agree that we're moving toward.
that's really hard. I, and maybe this kind of goes back into the conversation about like an alien invasion brings us all together.
Right.
But I don't. Is there really one thing that every human being agrees on? Like, is there?
Well, then that's the question of when you get to the old stories that we started on, like all the like Mesoamerican or different Eastern versus Western traditions that have manifested as religions, like
Yeah.
all these old stories that like all of our human like consciousness is constructed upon, because that's what really it is. Like it starts off as like an idea, and then it becomes extrapolated as a word, and then that becomes different languages, and these languages are pretty much how we hang our ideas on things. Like we have that word is for that idea, and it helps us recall it as a collective, so where you can talk about this idea without being confused and even plan for it in the future. And then we have stories, which are almost like even a distillation of those ideas, which makes it like literally this unifying theme. And like being like, like the hero, or like getting the girl, or being, whatever. Like these are just common motives that we have in all these stories. And I feel like in a way we are made for stories. Like we're made to have these narratives. And if we don't have a story, if we don't have a narrative, if we're cut off from our past, it spells doom for our future. And I feel like that might be where we're at a little bit. Like maybe we just don't have enough of a collective memory of what our story is.
Yeah, because I feel like as I feel like, well, it's been like this all the time, but well, it's different because it's different culturally.
Mm-hmm.
But so maybe this could kind of go into the difference in America and Japan. For example, one thing I mentioned, like wage gap.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when people are like on the same field, it's easy to understand each other.
Yeah.
But for example, I mean, that's why you have people in the city who will walk past somebody who's homeless, right? You
Right.
don't understand it. But then you'll see like another homeless person give another homeless person food because he's like, I know how that feels. Let me
Yeah.
share my food with you,
Yeah.
right?
So there's not enough of that empathy on a collective level. Like we just have these huge gaps in living and lifestyle.
Yeah. And it
That's
goes with like
wild.
finances, that's
Yeah.
why you got like the 1%,
Mm.
they're stealing and what, I don't know,
They're
whatever it
so
is.
removed from the regular folks that it's hard for them to
Exactly.
even see how they're messing people up.
So it's kind of like the general public would be like, it's like taking that, general public on the city walking past homeless. Let's
Mm.
take it to the next level. The 1% not caring about the
Our
general public.
relative, yeah, because we always like to think that we're the ones being shitted on, and at the end of the day, like we all kind of do our little bit of it too. I think
Yeah.
there's this sort of like we have to recognize that in ourselves, because just like you said, like there's levels to it, man. Like we could always complain about the people who are in the 1%, but even in the 1%, there's a 1% of that group too who are like, man, those guys are
It's
being terrible. Like we can't even relate to that type of struggle.
yeah.
We still in this
Yeah,
stratosphere,
man.
but like the way that we treat the person below us kind of tells us probably how that person's gonna treat the one below. You know what I mean? It's like it's
That's
this
very
thing that
true.
we just need to close the gap on all of that and realize that we're all these dope individuals, but also, and that gets back to the evil, like we're also capable of being bad. And I think that comes to that creation, like you talked about, like I don't know what it was, like when you're talking about kind of that doing something that makes a difference. And like I think we were talking about engineering and like making stuff,
Hmm.
but it's almost like that, like we evolved to change our reality. Like we evolved to
Yeah.
manifest different, like we have hands literally. Like dolphins have big brains, but they can't manipulate their reality. Like like different species have hands, but they don't have the type of mental and like linguistic capabilities that we do. So it's like we have this huge convergence of all these abilities to create. And I feel like
Mm.
that also speaks to our almost like this responsibility we have to create. It's almost like we were made for this purpose and we need to do this thing. Otherwise, what ends up happening is that we just destroy. It may be an accident, but we don't do or is as effective as a job. Or I don't know, like I feel like there's this need for us to be creating, to do something that is of value. And I just want
Mm.
to say, like how do you think of, if we're supposed to be making value, if we're supposed to be creating, how does that work when we're living in a consumption type of economy?
I guess because I feel like it becomes like a very hard topic about what to create. Because then, like, just thinking money aside, like, if humans were made to create, does
Hmm.
that mean we can create anything? Like, should I be allowed to create anything? For example, there's experiments out there talking about implanting humans into robots. That people are cloning. If we could create, human cloning, or that's a
Yeah,
controversial topic. Should I be able to create
that's a
stuff like that?
valid area, because honestly, at the end of the day, we have the capability now to do some really weird,
We do.
crazy stuff. And should we be doing those things? So I think I should make a distinction too. When I talk about creatives and creating,
Hmm.
I think of it has to be fundamentally good. And that's a weird distinction for some people,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
some people think that it's just any sort of expression. It is what it is. That's art. And that's where a lot of
Right.
this like postmodern, like super modern, like type art, where maybe you can have a banana that's duct taped to a wall, sell for millions of dollars. Like it's a
Yeah.
different type of era. And so
Yeah.
today I'm just saying, like, we have the ability to create, which means that we have the ability to kind of like speak against whatever the grain of our immediate perception is and make some order out of that chaos. And that's that thing you're talking about, like creating. Like when you, I don't know, when there's like this order that's in front of you and you're able to make it into this solidified narrative. So it's just
Hmm.
like it's like a bunch of potential, like even if we lived in the simulation, it's all these potential different places we
Yeah,
could
yeah,
go,
yeah.
but then you kind of converge your energy to make sure you stay on this one path that you want to get to the end of that specific road. That type of
Yeah.
mentality. I don't
I
know.
think it makes you think with the idea of creation. Like, I don't think people actually understand how, I would say, powerful that is, because like you mentioned, with your creation, you can make something that's never existed ever in
Right.
the world. But I don't want to go into the realm of like you're playing God, but like
I
you
honestly think
can't.
you are. I'm gonna push it for
You
you.
you you, you would
I
go for it?
honestly,
Yeah.
dude, in the Bible it says that we're gods. I don't remember. It like it depends. Like even in different different ideas surrounding that I don't know, that God complex, some might call it. I think that there is a spark of divinity in each human soul, and I think that
Okay.
everybody has the capability to create because they were created by the creator, like capital T capital C. So with that,
Okay.
I feel like it says that they were made in his image. He breathed his breath into them. If that is any sort of, we have all sorts of like scientific ways to, we know that it's a metaphor, but whatever that represents in reality, in physical reality,
Yeah.
if that means that I have a spark of infinity of creation inside me, that means that I can
Yeah.
work from that place, but I can also work from a place of being constricted as a human being. And that's where you have like
Right.
all these different manifestations of God, right? Like you have the Holy Spirit and Jesus and different people who've like
Yeah.
Nirvana and like all this different stuff that like represents the human in its perfected form, like rid of all the extra stuff, but able to like somehow get to that core. I don't know what the
Mm.
question was, but I feel like there's something there that you want to speak to. Like,
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about like with the idea of creation, like if we think about like if peace of God is in every single one of us, like I guess we just start going down that road of like people are like, all right, if God's in everybody, eh, it's what I'm creating of God. It could
yeah.
be freaking weapons of mass destruction.
Well, that
It could
gets
be,
interesting because that's
you
where
know,
you have to have that conversation with yourself too, right?
I, I mean, that's how the world's been running. Like people always use religious to, run their agendas.
That is true. But that's where I think it kind of gets divorced from the reality because the religion is static. It's almost like this like frozen moment in time, and it's almost like
Yeah.
it has this sort of gravity about it. It's like a friend of mine told me this metaphor. It's like ideas are like planets or like masses of like whatever in the universe, and a really big and a really solid idea that has a lot of truth or a lot of mass or a lot of weight to it
Hmm.
literally is a bigger planet or like maybe a sun, and you have all these other ideas that are surrounding that, right? And so like maybe you have an idea that's not as big and it's flying through space doing its own thing, and then it kind of gets caught in this like orbit of this other idea and they become like somewhat interplayed a little bit. And I think
Okay.
the basic the basic thing I want to get at is that there's these historical ideas that have lasted for a very long time, and those to me seem like they're probably the central ideas that everything else is based upon. So
Okay.
if those ideas are like the sun, then our ideas today about, human evolution or physical sciences or even the humanities are all kind of like surrounding this. Like even, you look at like if you do like a literary research and just look at all over humanity and art history, people have been writing about something like the divine, like this spark, this whatever. And there's obviously atheists too, and there's people in between, and there's agnostics. To me, I feel like
Yeah.
there's just this idea that we have something extra, and that extra is what makes us more than just like physical animals, but it gives us this ability to create something that, like, we can also lie, right? Like we have the ability to deceive, we have the ability to, like, we have this free will that allows us to see the chaos, and we can create bad out of it too. It's not like we can necessarily just always create good, but it's almost
Hmm.
like this responsibility. Like if we have an ideal of what good is, and that's supposed to be God, so if God is good and we are God, then that means we have the potential to be good. And that gives us, I think, an inner strength that we need to live this life. Because sometimes life is
Uh,
bullshit, man. Life can be rough. And sometimes it makes sense to do the bad thing because that's what your situation dictates. But if you have a piece of God in you, then you know that, man, I know I have the ability to be godlike in this situation. And those are the stories that we're drawn to. You know what I mean?
right.
The stories that have
Yeah.
somebody who was able to overcome that situation and do something ridiculous even in spite of it.
So I'm thinking, just another question I asked just off of that, talking about like creation and good and stuff,
Yeah.
and take something to make it bad.
Yeah.
So let's say we take humans off the planet Earth, and
Mm-hmm.
just everything else. Everything that happened to Earth, whatever, extinction, ice age, whatever, all of this. Would you say everything that happened to Earth was good? Was there anything that happened to Earth that was bad?
I think that there's like an ultimate good, and then there's like in the moment good. And these are two different types of good. So there's just good of what we have right now, like what we can
Yeah.
experience right now. That's just either, like, usually it's pretty apparent and it's pretty objective. Like this is good, this feels good, or this is bad, this feels bad. And
Yeah.
then there's like this long-term good. And this is the kind of good that is actually divorced from all of those moments because it's in light of a bigger plan.
Right. Right.
So if you like go through some like heartbreak, but then you grow a sense of self that wasn't there before because you have now grown in self-awareness or ability or some other way, then that's like something that was bad in the moment, but a long-term good. My theory is
Right.
that people have been here so like we have not been here, like even the whole of humanity. If you say it's 400,000 years, we've been here like a snap in terms of like how long the universe has been here. So the universe has been cultivating some really big, like let's say planets for a long time, these huge
Yeah.
ideas. And
Yeah.
we've been here for literally like that long. And we
Yeah.
have the audacity to start trying to change things to what we think is correct. And I just think that there's a sense of awe that's missing. Like it's like, yeah, we know a lot of like information and like stats and data points, but there's this like really big structure that kind of exceeds all of that. And
Hmm.
unless you really think that everything just kind of fell together because of mere chance, I feel like there is some, like the fact that we have DNA, which is literally a language. Like if you just go into a cave and you see like drawings of animals, you wouldn't assume that it was like a natural, like rocks just went up and like
Yeah.
made that
Yeah.
happen. You would be
Yeah.
like, oh, an intelligent or semi-intelligent being came and drew on that. It's like we see literal languages drawn into the DNA, like into the cells of our being. And it's easy for us to just think that there was no intelligent being that came in to create that. Like it was just randomly, boom, we
Hmm.
just have it. So to me, DNA is like one example of evidence of why there has to be something bigger that is interacting in our system as we
Okay.
interact then in our system as a conduit or as a vessel of that one thing. So it's like we have access to this thing if we so choose, and then we can act in that way. So like we are literally light and we are love and we're like these like particles of like infinite whatevers, but we
Hmm.
also are physical. Like we have, I like to say we have bodies, we are souls. And that means not necessarily like You don't say I am a hand, you say I have a hand, right?
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And so I don't know why we say I am a body. Like I think we have a body. Like we have a body and we are something deeper. And it's hard for us to identify it. So sometimes we just say I am a body, which can lead to other problems like I don't know, other things. But if we are
Yeah,
something that's fundamentally deeper than that, then our body just becomes another tool.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So
I don't know, like being a tool in terms of like doing things for good. So it's like you kind of get to choose your role, like choose your character, almost like any
yeah.
like a origin story. Like you just get to kind of like look back at your past, see what's happened to you. Like, oh, I can use that fuck up for that. That's gonna be good. Okay, I can use that one for that. All right, and then you kind
Yeah,
of choose
yeah,
your
yeah.
character, and then you just move forward, and you like start to wreck shit because you're your own superhero in a way. Like you've determined that I'm gonna live in a way that is emblematic of what I think is my true nature, which is godly. And if that's the case, then I can beat anything and do anything. That's just
Right.
my theory. But last thing, because I don't want to take too much more of your time. I appreciate you even giving me this time. Like, is there anything that
No
you
worries.
have in head or in mind right now that you're thinking about, like in this period of, I don't know, prolonged silence, I guess you would call it for the
Mm,
world? Like, what are some things that Steven is thinking about?
man, to try to recall it all. Well, I guess one thing that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I saw a picture online, and it was talking about like what's gonna happen after we get over this pandemic.
Hmm.
You know, people are hoping that the world goes into a different approach towards unifying, and then some people think we're just gonna go back to daily normal lives. So I I guess for me, I really well I hope one day I wouldn't say world peace because I know that's really hard to achieve, but I hope for that. But I do hope that one day we can all just kind of unify, right? Like
No, I
in a
hear you.
way where and like
I hear you,
so
but it's hard because some people have done some really bad things. And so it's hard to just look at
yeah
those bad things and just be like, "Yay, it's okay." Like there's some really, really I think
yeah
there's some really, really bad people and bad like things that have manifested in the worst possible way because their situations were birth of the worst possible collection of
yeah
experiences or whatever it was. But like you can't just write those off. So how do you have this sense of divine, like this sense of justice, this truth, this
that's
realness,
hard.
but you also have this sense of let's all come together and be happy and
That's
feel, you know
hard.
what I mean? Like it's you
Yeah,
gotta have both.
because different happinesses too, man. Different. So like just thinking about that and like I want to question some things like truthfully, man, like just right we're like in our mid 20s, 25, 26,
Yeah.
and I know we've talked about like social media in the past and things like that, and I'm curious like in the future. I know people are saying that we're going to be like socially deprived in a way because we don't like I guess I'm curious like in the future are people going to lose the skill to
That's
socialize
a
properly?
it's an interesting question because we were talking a little bit about like we didn't get into it this conversation, maybe sometime in the future, but dating and romance in these different cultures as well. And one of the
You're
things that
right.
that might even talk about with that is how that has morphed from something where chivalry and romance and
Yeah,
continuing to
man.
pursue and all those things were involved, but now it's literally like a thumb movement across a screen that can
Yeah, just slide in the
indicate.
DMs, man.
Right. So there's different strokes for different folks. And what does that mean? Like how does that impact our brain chemistry? Because that's what really matters. Like how we start thinking differently because of these changes
Yeah.
in behavior. And once you create new norms and new behaviors and everybody started doing these things and they don't know why, it's even scarier because then when you reveal the why underneath it and it seems like it's bad, people are gonna flip because it hasn't been we haven't been advancing in a way that has been, I don't know, emblematic of our inner human spirit, I guess, if you'd say. Like if we have this capability to be great, sometimes the way
hmm
we treat each other isn't necessarily that. I don't know, like we
Yeah.
have all this potential. I think we're a ball of potential energy, dude. I really believe it. I feel like we're like each little like
Yeah,
orbs
dude.
of potential energy, and we can do everything or we can do nothing, but we all have that little spark.
You have a choice, and the thing is, I think maybe the greatest evil or the greatest enemy towards potential is like laziness or
It's
I
ourselves.
don't
It's ourselves. Yeah,
yeah.
no, you're right. It's not somebody else. It's our own like ability to overcome whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
That's tough, but I just hope I guess specifically talking from a guy's point of view,
Yeah.
I just hope in the future like, guys just don't forget how to like talk to a woman in person, right?
Yeah.
Not just be
No,
like messing.
it's gonna be interesting. I feel like the next 5 to 10 years are gonna determine a lot of the next iteration of humankind. Like the trajectory is gonna be a lot different, and
Yeah.
people's attitudes now might have some sort of projecting effect. But we'll see. It's gonna be interesting for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see this video like 2050.
Yeah, you're like, okay, what are they talking about? So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so what is today? It's May 10th today, yeah? Today
It's
is
Mother's Day.
Sunday, May 10th. It is Mother's Day in the States. It was Mother's Day out here last month. I don't know. I said Happy Mother's Day to her both times, so cover
Okay.
our bases. But yeah, we have a different day in the UK for some reason.
I didn't know
But
that.
yeah, anyway, everybody who stayed and actually listened to this whole thing, appreciate you. It's been about an hour now, so I'm gonna let my guy sign off. He is in Okinawa, Japan, which means that it's getting close to 10 o'clock over there, probably maybe
Yeah,
even
yeah.
11.
9:30 right now.
Yeah, getting close to 10. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. But this is my guy Stephen Estelle, back from the Homeward Flossma days. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, bro.
No worries. It was good to have a conversation, dude.
Hell yeah, I always like him. And sometime in the future we might do it again. But for now, be easy.
All right, take care, dude.
You too.
Make